All right, everybody, and welcome to the Lake Norman Chamber of Commerce BusinessWorks. We're going to have an economic forecast and look at some of the future trends in our area. I'm going to do it a little bit impromptu. We have Mayor Woody Washam on the line. Mayor, do you want to share anything about what's going on in Cornelius or our three towns?
Well, I'll be happy to. We've got some tremendous economic opportunities, if you will. First led off by the Kane Center of the Arts, which we've started demolition of that site. That's going to be an economic regeneration of our downtown area. So we're more than excited about that and got a little more money to raise, but that's on the horizon for us. In addition to that, our planning department is slammed these days, really with some transitional, wonderful opportunities in all parts of our town, from the lake to the southern part of town to downtown with what's going on with OMB, who's getting ready to submit a very exciting plan to detail what they're planning over there. So it's pretty incredible. I had 3 public hearings last night alone at our town board meeting. So it's a wonderful opportunities for our town. It's coming out of the woodworks here in what many people would think would be a recession. It's not here in Cornelius, I assure you.
Woody, I was very fortunate last week, or it might have been the week before, we actually started the demolition project of downtown Cornelius, where we tore down the old, I guess they were exchange buildings, but very exciting with the Kane Center going up and very promising for our region. We have Dale Gilmore. Dale Gilmore is our business growth chair. And a few weeks ago, we were talking about what programs we might want to put on. And we talked about an economic forecast, because again, everybody's questioning what's going on with our area, the Charlotte area, and in particular, our region. Dale, you want to introduce today's guest?
Yeah, so Matt Martin is a regional executive with the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond. And Matt and I served on a board, the Charlotte Mecklenburg Opportunity Task Force. Prior to this, that's where I really got to know Matt, plus the Charlotte Chamber. I knew him from there as well. So Matt's a West Point grad, served in the military. He's got a doctorate from Delaware. Matt's an expert in economics, and we'll have a great presentation for us today that's focused on our region. And he's going to look at a couple things that with retail and some specific kind of lines of business that will be interesting to our members. We appreciate Matt for being on board and giving us this presentation. Ideally next year we'll bring Matt back in person for a bigger audience. But while we're dealing with what we're dealing with, we want to thank Matt for being a part of this and giving us his knowledge and expertise this morning.
Thanks, Dale. It's a pleasure to join you all virtually, and as Dale was just saying, look forward to a time where we can actually be in person again, and hopefully that's not so very long away. For me, working from home, I would welcome the opportunity to get out and about a little bit more. I do have a presentation, so I'm going to bring that up. I can figure out how to make this pretty. There we go. So what I'm going to do, and I'll count on Bill or Dale or somebody to cut me off if time runs on, but I'll try to be concise here, is give an overall picture of where we are and where we're going, starting at the national level, because local and regional economies operate in that context. So we need to understand the broader trends, and that's where there'll be a bit of a forward-looking perspective in it, and then try to bring it down as close as I can to the local level. It's hard when you get below the MSA level to find timely data, but I've got a couple of things that are available there and worth talking about. And I'm happy to take comments and questions along the way. So let me start out with kind of where we are and where we're going. And what you're seeing here is quarter to quarter changes in real GDP at the national level. in those dark blue bars. And then to the right, what you see is a forecast that comes from monetary policymakers, specifically all the members of the Federal Open Market Committee. That's Jay Powell and the other governors of the Federal Reserve, plus the 12 regional bank presidents. Every quarter or so, they put in a forecast. And what you see there is the quarter 4 to quarter 4 change, percentage change in GDP that they forecast. This first one is as of June, and I'm going to show you an updated one in a second. So you see a light blue bars are the full range of members, and then they throw out the highs and lows. The darker bar is what they call the central tendency, and then the orange diamond is the median forecast. So I'm going to reference the median. But the first thing to notice is that second quarter figure, that it's quarter to quarter at an annual rate. So we didn't lose a third of our economy. Roughly divide that by 4. We had between the first quarter, which was a smaller decline, and the second quarter, the economy did shrink by almost 10%. And so that's a pretty substantial decline. You can see how it compares to the Great Recession. And then as of this June forecast, you can see that policymakers thought that by the fourth quarter, we would still be down by that orange dot in the middle, roughly 7% or so compared to the previous year. And then 21 showing a pretty rapid rebound. So the idea is Q2 was really bad. Q3 was going to be something of a rebound, but it was going to leave us pretty short. And if you take this forecast and take it out to the end of 2022, it would suggest that the level of GDP was going to be about 2 years worth of growth lower than if we hadn't had this COVID episode. But what has happened, the FOMC came out with a new update, and a lot of data has obviously come out since June. So just last week, they updated their forecast. So here's what it looks like now. Importantly, that orange diamond for the end of 2020 now shows something like a 3.5% decline instead of 7%. And that's based on the data showing that the third quarter rebound started out more robustly than we thought. Now it's leveled out recently, but it looks like we're going to end the year in somewhat better shape than we thought earlier in this episode. So now if you take those orange diamonds and sketch out the level of GDP, by the end of 2022, we'll have lost about a year's worth of growth by this forecast instead of 2. So that's good. There's still a hole, and importantly, what we're seeing is this is the overall level of economic output. The business recovery looks like it's running ahead of the labor market recovery, and that's where this next element comes in. So this is the unemployment rate for the U.S. You can see the spike to about 15%, and then it's come down pretty sharply since then. We're at 8.4% as of August. And the latest forecast from the FOMC, they think we'll end the year at 8%, maybe lower. I just note by the end of 2021, there's still a lot of uncertainty about what the unemployment rate will be. We'll get into some of that detail when we get down to the regional level. But we're looking at an elevated unemployment rate for the next couple of years, even though it looks like GDP is going to get within a year of where we would have been without this. So it's a pretty sharp recovery. And then there's a lot of dynamics within this forecast. One that I'll call out is what's happening with labor force participation. So this is the percentage of those 16 and over who are either working or looking for work. And you can see when COVID hit, that plummeted by 3 or 4 percentage points. It's come back to some degree, but we've got, at the national level, we've got at least a couple million workers who have left the labor force altogether. And there's some good reasons for this. With schools being out, now we're starting to see children get back to school, but initially in March, everybody was sent home, right? So if you have a household with 2 income earners and you've got elementary kids that are at home, someone's got to be there with them, right? So part of this is households making decisions about childcare, how they handle that. older workers maybe who are worried about catching the disease and being more at risk, making the decision to stay out of the workforce, and a range of other things that are going on as well. I can't say that the expanded unemployment benefits weren't having an impact as well. That extra $600 a week might convince someone to not look for work. And this survey would be done independent of whether someone's getting that benefit or not. So the bottom line is, though, we still have a lot of unemployed workers, mostly at the lower income levels in industries like leisure and hospitality industries, entertainment, even retail, even though sales have been better, a lot of retail employees still out of work. So importantly, the initial federal funding to support households, the $1,200 payments back in April and the $600 a week, really supported income, even though spending fell. So what you see here is the red dotted line. That's after-tax personal income, and it shot up in April and has remained elevated since then, even though spending declined quite a bit. What this suggests is that households have a little bit of savings, maybe less at the lower end because they tend to spend most of their income. But so far, at least, and we have, this is only data's not been updated since July. The concern is going forward without additional stimulus that we'll start to see some impact to households. And then you throw in things like end of moratoriums on evictions for renters and things like that. And the problems for particularly lower income households may start to crop up as we go through the fall. But then just to quickly take us through some spending categories, retail sales have recovered so that they're actually positive on a year-over-year basis now, which is pretty remarkable given where we were back in March and April. But it's sales of goods have held up well, services less well. So, and that's going to show up when we look at local employment. And part of the good side of things is homes. Now, this is existing homes. This is, I lost my paper here. This is new home sales, right? Single family new home sales. So this implies new home construction. And you can see the long, tough slog it's been to get back to just the average home building pace of sales rate of the 1990s. In the midst of all of this, the July numbers were very strong, and we've surged above that. New home sales are at a post-Great Recession high as of July. And I think that's pretty remarkable. And certainly when I talk to home builders across the Carolinas, they're building homes as fast as they can. They know that municipalities are working through things, just as the mayor was indicating, public hearings on zoning and permitting. I think a lot of municipalities have figured out how to do that stuff better and more efficiently remotely. And that's going to be important if we're going to have enough home building going forward. So I'll come back to that again as we get to the local data. I'll just make one final comment at the national level, and that is on monetary policy. This is the forecast for our federal funds rate. This is the short-term policy rate that the Federal Open Market Committee votes on every meeting. And again, this is they put in a forecast, each member, for where they think that rate will be at the end of the year. So nobody's forecasting any pickup in rates before 2022, and it's a lone member at that point. And I think this is important for businesses to understand, because this may affect financing rates down the line to some degree. There's been a change in our monetary policy framework. For most of the last 5+ years, inflation has run below the Fed's 2% mandate. What the Federal Open Market Committee recently said is, and they said this in the statement, so I'll just read this part. With inflation running persistently below our longer term goal, the committee will aim to achieve inflation moderately above 2% for some time, so that inflation averages 2% over That's an important change. So I think it's fair to say that markets and some businesses have viewed 2% as kind of the upper limit for inflation, and then they built their pricing in accordingly. So if you're supplying Walmart, for example, Walmart's looking at that 2%, and they're telling their suppliers, we're not taking any price change. 0% is your target because we've got to be the discount supplier. That gets built into business processes, inflation, it affects wage rates, all that sort of thing. And it's almost a ratcheting down impact on inflation and inflation expectations. So that's pretty important change to be aware of. So let me start talking about the regional economy now. And here I'm showing year-over-year change in payroll employment for North Carolina, and then Charlotte is for the entire MSA. And you'll note that throughout most of this last expansion, this historically long expansion we had, Charlotte's employment growth was running faster than North Carolina, and North Carolina was running a little bit faster than the nation as a whole. So very good performance regionally. You can see the declines in the since COVID, and they've been greater than the worst of the declines in the Great Recession, not as long-lived. And Charlotte's fared moderately worse than the state as a whole. Now, I mentioned this breakdown between goods and services. That shows up when you break down employment into those two broad categories. So this is for the Charlotte MSA, manufacturing versus services. And you can see that there's a difference in performance there. From my viewpoint, when I look at these manufacturing numbers, yeah, manufacturing employment's down almost 6% year over year. Nothing like it was during the Great Recession. And for manufacturers who are, maybe their revenues and sales are down 10%, they've adjusted their cost structure to account for that, right? And I have not found a manufacturer that I've talked to in the last 2 or 3 months that doesn't see a way forward. They're either profitable now or they will be shortly when they finish adjusting their cost structure. They're fairly optimistic actually about their performance in 2021. That's much more varied on the service side because you can talk to companies that are hotel owner operators that they're still not seeing activity anywhere close to what they're used to. Restaurants in some cases are still struggling because of the limitations on in-person dining. Anybody in the entertainment industry, think of Major League Baseball is on TV, but think of a minor league baseball team that still doesn't have fans. And actually, I think in most cases their seasons have shut down. The disastrous financial impacts for them, and they've got to figure their way out of that. So there are certain segments in the services side that are really going to struggle going forward still.
Matt, you mentioned many of those segments, but can you define services? What all you feel like falls into services?
It's a very broad category. So it includes your bigger categories are healthcare and education are lumped together, and hospitals shut down almost. So they shut down all elective surgery. So they had furloughs early on. So that bottom point in services employment would have included furloughs from hospitals. You've got professional and business services, which have held up pretty well on the whole. Some consulting, advertising, brand management, some of that stuff did fall off. Financial services held up well. Banks got really busy with the PPP program, and so that put out a lot of lending. Their deposits are still elevated from that, so they're still sorting through that. And if they're doing, on the consumer side, if they're doing mortgage lending's been running hot, right? Both sales and refi. So those are some of the big categories, and then there's a bunch of other stuff in there as well that includes the entertainment and leisure and hospitality pieces that are really struggling. Does that answer your question? So services is really broad, and performance is really uneven across some of those sectors within services. I thought it'd be useful to put Charlotte's performance in context for what's happening around the rest of the state. So these are all year-over-year changes in payroll. They're all down. Charlotte's actually faring better than most of the larger metropolitan areas in the state. Raleigh looks particularly rough. And one of the things that comes out of the, the Raleigh piece as well, so this is payroll data, which is one survey every month. The other one's the household survey, which gives you the unemployment rate. And when you look at that, Charlotte's labor force growth, this idea that people have fallen out of the labor force, it's down, but it's down by a pretty small percentage, 1.6%. In Raleigh, the labor force has shrunk by over 5% as of the last reading year over year. So I don't have an answer for why that's the case, but Raleigh's got this elevated unemployment rate that would have been high, even higher, had there been, if we accounted for those workers who've left the workforce. And then I threw some of the outliers in there. Some of these, Jacksonville's kind of a unique case with a heavy military presence. Burlington, think of manufacturing as and which has fared less badly, but then Hickory's a heavy manufacturing MSA, and they're still down pretty heavily. Asheville is tourism, and they have suffered for that in their hospitality and leisure sectors. So that gives you some sense for that. So what I thought I'd do though is go through a little exercise to bring this down for a local level, and I'm happy the Mayor of Cornelius is on because that was one of my examples here. So one of the features of this episode is that low and moderate income households have been hit the hardest, and that correlates pretty heavily or pretty highly with education levels. So this is something that we have on a running basis out of the data. So what I have here, what you see at the top part of this chart, is the percentage of adults that have that particular educational attainment level. So for the US, for example, 12% of adults have less than a high school education, 27 have a high school diploma, and so forth. And then I'm comparing it to a couple of jurisdictions that are in your neck of the woods. And I put North Carolina just as a reference on the right, in part because when we get to the unemployment rate, this idea of labor force participation matters for the North Carolina unemployment rate. But as you look at this, the towns of Cornelius and Davidson in particular have these very high levels of educational attainment. If I put Huntersville in here, the numbers fall somewhere between Cornelius and Davidson. And if I take the unemployment rates for various education levels at the national level, which we have, and do sort of a weighted average for Cornelius and Davidson, you get those unemployment rates down below. So you can compare those to the national unemployment rate of 8.4% and see that the North Charlotte area, the Lake Norman area, has a relatively low unemployment rate. They don't look very good compared to North Carolina, but that's where this labor force participation comes in. If you take Raleigh and a lot of the rest of the state that have had this substantial drop in labor force participation, you get a lower unemployment rate because people are selecting to be out of the calculation altogether. Charlotte doesn't have that same drop, so it's a little bit apples to oranges in that sense. A 6 to 7% unemployment rate is pretty good given where we are right now. And then I have the reference there at the bottom for median household income. Obviously, a town like Davidson is a little bit unique as a college town with a very high level educational attainment and high income levels as well. So the one other thing I want to do from this, and it'll have implications for some of the activities in the area, retail, other sort of local businesses, is what's happening with the housing market and what we can learn from that as far as what's happening with migration patterns within the US and even regionally. The other good data source we have here comes from the Regional Realtors Association. Now, this has a lot of numbers, and I'm not going to go through all of them. This is data that came out just a couple of days ago, covers through August. So on the far right there, the year to date, look at the first two percentage change numbers there. New listings for the year as a whole are down for the Charlotte region almost 7%, but pending sales are up 6%. Now that's not sustainable, right? Because you only have so much inventory out there. And if you look at the last line, you can see as of August, there's only 1.2 months worth of inventory out there, which is extraordinarily low for a housing market. So there's a fair amount of sales activity out there. The local real estate market is hot, and it's outrunning listings, and you're seeing some reflections in pricing as well. What's interesting about this data is you can pull out, they have it by county and by jurisdiction as well. So I pulled out a few of those out of their report. And just those same few numbers, looking at the disparity between listings and pending sales, and then what the impact is on year-over-year changes in median sales prices. And so for Charlotte area, anything, Mecklenburg County running at 9% plus growth in home prices is pretty remarkable. That's more robust than we've seen in most of the recent history of Mecklenburg County. Not quite as hot in Cornelius and Davidson, but you could imagine that could change given the disparities between listings and sales. And here's a little bit of what's happening, and I hear this throughout the Carolinas, but it seems particularly strong in the Charlotte area, is people wanting to get out of high density areas like New York, who've maybe been through the COVID experience, and there's maybe some other factors at play, and they're mobile. They may have an employer that's told them you're working remotely, so you can sort of choose where you want to live. And they're coming to the Charlotte area and they're buying homes. And I can tell you from personal experience, we put our house on the market Friday. By Sunday morning, we had 3 offers above our listing price, all of them from people from the Northeast, New York, Maryland, I forget where the other one was from. And that's a story that we're seeing. The more extreme ones I've heard are people from Manhattan buying places in Foxcroft, for example. I've heard 3 stories of New Yorkers buying $2 million or so homes in Foxcroft sight unseen. They're done with New York and want to get out. The other places are coming from, I've heard Chicago, and I've heard California, and I think the Charlotte, one of whatever the Charlotte Business Journal or whatever their publisher is, just ran a story on this. If you want another perspective on that trend. So this has always been sort of the growth model for the Charlotte area, is people, college educated workers, move to Charlotte from elsewhere. It looks like we're going to see an acceleration of that over the next couple of years. It seems to have started. Those that I talk to in that business think it's going to stay that way for a period of time. And so we're likely to see this elevated in-migration. That has implications for housing construction and the support services that go with it, right? So in the towns where people are going to come to, and I've got to think the suburbs of Charlotte, which would include Huntersville, Cornelius, even Davidson, and maybe some other places, are gonna benefit from this, and it'll be companies as well. So this relocation decision, I think, is important as well. And that's going to be a combination of things. So for service-based companies that might have a singular headquarter location, they might go to a hub and spoke model and say, yeah, our headquarters is still in pick your big city, but we're going to pick a couple of other places that have an airport that can get you where you need to go, like a Charlotte, and we'll put a spoke out there, and you can choose to work out of that office if you So I think that trend will develop. Obviously, manufacturers and others are gonna play a role as well. I hear a fair amount about reshoring, or which the trend away from China had started before COVID, but you throw in trade wars and COVID, and I think that trend has picked up as well. It all points to Charlotte seeing some measure of acceleration of a trend that already existed that's going to support additional growth going forward. So let me wrap it up and then see whatever questions there might be. Happy to have some discussion. There's a lot of unknowns about where we're going to go from here, and the course of this disease is in the driver's seat. But there are some responses to it that are going to matter. I would have thought we would have had additional fiscal stimulus by now to try and prevent more permanent scarring for small business in particular. I think we're going to see a wave of bankruptcies in mom and pop type businesses, particularly restaurants, but maybe some other areas as well, and the lower income households that are really at risk for some adverse longer term impacts. And then of course we have an election that's pending, and that always presents the possibility for policy changes. How consumers react, whatever happens with this disease, I think the political will for shutdowns, sort of going back down that road, is probably limited, but it doesn't matter. Individuals are going to make choices about how much they're willing to be out and about. And I think we have enough of evidence that as cases pick up and things become more risky, a segment of the population pulls back and self-isolates. And so we could see some of that again. And as I said, then talking about the regional economy, whatever we think happens at the national level, we're very likely to fare better than the U.S. as a whole. We're a destination in Charlotte, and I think certainly the Lake Norman area will be an outperformer from that perspective as well. But the overall direction is going to depend on the disease and things like the presence of a vaccine. When's that going to become widely available? And will people be willing to get vaccinated to help us control this? So let me stop there. I'm going to see if I can stop sharing and turn this over. But happy to have some questions or comments.
Matt, Terry had a question here, and I think it's more of a clarifying question around what's in the payroll numbers. She suggested that, those, if businesses' sales are lower and folks are paid on a commission basis, her question really is that included in that, potentially included in those payroll calculations?
Yeah, well, the payroll is it's sort of binary. Are you working or aren't you? The household survey gets at how many hours, whether you're working part-time, want to work full-time. There are separate reports on income, and with a lag we get some breakdown by industry and the like. So, but it's not in the pay levels are not in the payroll report that we get month to month. So I haven't looked at that breakdown. Broadly speaking, I think that trend is right. It's perhaps overshadowed by think of the large number of particularly lower income workers who got furloughed, and then a lot of those came back in May and June and July. And I think those numbers, if you're looking at like aggregate income levels, that kind of overshadowed it. But it is the case that overall income, earned income, is lower than it was. When I showed you that chart on household income, it's the transfers from the government that caused that to shoot up, not the actual pay from employment that mattered there. Hopefully that answers the question.
Sure.
Bill, I'm trying to find the host thing to turn this back over to you.
I'll add one comment that we actually had a report last night on our budget revenue at the local level. One of the big concerns we had a heck of a time budgeting this particular fiscal year, but we're now got the results of the first part of our new fiscal year, which began July 1st. And that was the sales tax revenue for the month of June, which was surprisingly in excess of 2019. So we were pretty pumped about that. And hopefully that's a trend. Municipal governments in particular, there's very little, particularly in this area, that's trickled down with the COVID relief efforts to the local town governments, if you will. I think some of it's maybe hit the county level, but it's up to them to disperse it on down. So we're really having some challenges with some budget constraints that we have experienced in this last year, but that was good news for us.
That is good news. That is something I worry about, especially when you then get to the state level. And as you indicated, there's not much trickle down, and states have to deal with the cost of unemployment insurance, right? And if there's not, now some of these programs are federal programs. The extra $600 a week was a federal program, but clearly the state programs are being taxed more heavily as well. I think North Carolina is in better shape than a lot of states with a rainy day fund, but they're going to burn through that. And I think there's at the state level some tough budget choices that hopefully mayor won't trickle down and impact you too heavily. But that I would worry about 2021 fiscal year. Well, whatever the fiscal year after this one could be a really tough one.
Yeah, and what I guess the rest of that story is one of the things we are seeing. I'm a banker as well, so I'm seeing this in terms of impact on our occupancy tax for the hotel motel industry. I mean, they are really, really hurting right now. Now, the good news is we are seeing some upward trends, but in terms of the impact that will have, on a hotel motel tax that we get here is concerning. It really is. It's also concerning, at the banking level too, as we're in a different world now, and will folks travel less? Have they gotten used to the electronic means of communication and less face to face? I don't know, but anyway, we're concerned about that particular industry in addition.
Yeah, understandable. Business travel looks likely to be lower for some long period of time. I've talked to plenty of CEOs. It's interesting. One who said they just had their first grandchild, and he said normally he'd be on the road and he'd not have spent any time with his grandchild, and he's been able to do that. And I wonder if that sort of stuff changes some thinking. But probably the main factor is businesses have figured out they probably don't need to travel as much, though certainly if you're in sales, you want to get in front of customers at some point and maintain those relationships. If you have them, I guess you can do that.
Hey, Matt, not to jump too far ahead, but with the election, regardless of how the outcome of the election, I think everybody's going to have a different tax policy, one side or the other. But do you see a potential consumption tax in the future? I mean, have you heard any kind of thoughts of how we would have to deal with, the deficit in the economy, the deficit at the federal level? Just think it out loud. Anything you can think about or share that is insightful for us?
Yeah, 10 years ago was the time to start on that track. The sooner we would have started, the better that would have been. It's coming out of this episode. It's going to be hard. But the first thing to do when we're past this is to get annual deficits below the growth rate of the economy, right? So get it to where your overall debt starts to shrink relative to the economy, and then maybe you can eventually find your way out. Obviously, it'd be great to get to the point where we eliminate budget deficits on a yearly basis for some period of time. But there are going to be this episode is going to make it more imperative to make some of those tough choices. Now, the one good thing in all of this is that the cost of financing the deficit remains fairly low. But that's one of those things where financial markets get to decide when that ends, right? I think the phraseology and I can't remember the context for this, Hemingway or someone was asked, how did he die? Slowly at first, then suddenly. That's kind of the way the deficit works. It's fine, and markets are fine with us having, a deficit over 100% of GDP until they're not, right? And we've seen this in other countries. The US isn't other countries, but we've seen in other countries where that switch gets flipped pretty suddenly.
Yeah. Thanks for that.
Matt, totally off subject. Do I see you're a VMI graduate?
Actually, West Point.
West Point, okay.
I've got all sorts of there's a story about this thing that I just got. I'm a first Gulf War vet, and that's my company's guide on. The public affairs officer for 3rd Special Forces Group pulled that out of a mill van last year sometime, and there was a little process using Twitter where he found me and got it to me.
And you were first Cav?
I was attached to 1st Cav. I started out in 2nd Armored Division, though. If that means anything to you, I don't know if you're a vet or.
No, I see the insignia on your right, on the other side of the wall there.
Oh yeah, this thing.
Yep. I recognized it. I've got a lot of family in the military.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for putting together the program today. And how you make me host is if you look at your little profile where it says more, there should be a toggle bar to
I don't see a more anywhere. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I can cancel the spotlight video.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, there's that, and then there should be some other toggle bars that says make. But how about click on my profile? Click on my profile. It says make Bill the host. Make me.
Oh, there we go. That worked.
Yeah. Dale, thank you for putting this program together. Do you have anything to share in terms of business growth?
No, I mean, the chamber's working on some things for focused on our kind of existing business owners that are leaders in our community that we'll be talking about soon at some point. But I think once we get through COVID and the rest of the year, that stuff will roll out to next year. I think the other thing to share is that Matt, although Matt's working from home, he's always available to us in the future. So if anybody has questions, or even the members that sort of rewatch this recording, if they want to provide those questions to you, Bill, we'll get them to Matt and get the members' questions answered. So I just want to thank everybody for being here today. Thanks, Matt, so much for presenting for us, and we look forward to seeing you in person soon.
I do as well. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Mayor, for me putting you on the spot and sharing about the Kane Art Center.
I can talk about that all day long.
Well, thanks, everybody, for joining us today. And we're going to go ahead and end the meeting. And thank you again, Matt. And everybody have a great week at the lake.
Take care.